let me first start off by saying that there's no classified data here. This is just a sample lab environment. So everything you're seeing is just a lab, no classified data. And I have 3 remote desktops here. So I have one where I'm connected to the Sentris server, where I'm accessing the portal and hub. And then I have 2 Windows desktops where I'm logged in as user 1 and user 2. You can see on the banner, user 1 has a top secret, and the accesses in user 2 has just secret up to secret, which matches what we see in the Sentris portal here for user 1 and user 2. And I used the airport trigraphs as the programs, and so you'll see that user 2 just has the DC region trigraphs in this case. So now I'm going to flip over to the hub user interface on BrickStor, and you can see you can provision all sorts of data sets, right? On the same BrickStor, you could have SMB, NFS, S3. You can access the same files over all 3 protocols as well. But today we're focused on SMB and ABAC. So I'm going to go down to this ABAC panel and show you all of the data sets that are configured to work with ABAC, and in this particular case, Sentris. And so we've already configured Sentris as our ABAC provider. That's actually very easy to do to configure a provider. You just have to provide the IP of the web server and the credentials. But we've already done that, so we don't need to do that now. So now I'm going to show you how easy it is to create a new data set. So I'm going to go in here and create a data set called webinar. And you're going to see I have the options here. I'm going to add data set encryption. I'm going to stick with the general file systems storage profile. And I'm connected to Active Directory, as we've mentioned. So I'm going to give domain admins full control. And I'm going to give domain users read-write privileges by default. Now, we also have ABAC enabled. So we're already, for this data set, going to connect to Sentris. So first it'll evaluate if you have the ACLs to even see those files and folders. And then it'll next evaluate your attributes. If you don't have ACLs, it'll stop right there. If you have the ACLs but not the attributes, you won't be able to access it either. We're not going to turn on label inheritance for this particular demo, but with label inheritance, basically you can choose for each folder what you want files to automatically be labeled as when they're written or created there. So for maybe automatic logging or situations where you don't want to have to label it each time and everything in that folder should have the same markings, you could turn that on, and that happens for each folder, and you can choose a different label or marking for each subdirectory as well. So it's very configurable. I'm going to turn on access-based enumeration, which means if you don't have access to that file, it will be hidden, so you wouldn't see a file name for a file you don't have access to or shouldn't have access to. We have quotas and reservations. Quotas limit the maximum amount of data you can put in a data set, and then reservations are the opposite. If thin provisioning, it reserves that space for that data set. We have our active defense automatically turned on for the data set as well, which is looking for ransomware, privileged access abuse, as well as excessive file access for reads, writes, deletes. In this particular situation, we're using some static settings. I've had very low settings in order for demo purposes to be able to trigger things, but you can configure them on a per data set basis. And then you also have long-term analysis, which is doing AI and machine learning to figure out what each user's normal behavior looks like as well, which is more dynamic. We also have our data protection profiles. That sets how frequently and how long you're retaining the data sets for. So if, in this case, I've already selected the general file system, so that storage profile automatically has a data protection profile associated with it, which you can see here. You could choose a custom policy for a particular data set or modify it, but we're just going to go with that for now. And then we're going to replicate this data set to another BrickStor for our DR or COOP type protection. So I'm going to replicate it to another instance in this BrickStor. So now on the next page, I get a summary of all of the settings I'm going to use, and I'm going to go and create that share. And from here, I'm going to pull up the Explorer window, and we're going to actually see those shares. So we're going to see that now we have that new webinar share has been added to that. And so we have all those lists that match that. Now I'm going to flip over to user 1, who has all the access. And they too will see that data set and expand that. And so now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to create a new file. So I'll just, for this purposes, create a top secret webinar document. And now I'm going to use the Sentris marking tool to actually go ahead and label that file. So in this particular case, I'm just going to choose the marking, but you could, if you desired, have it also do keywords and rule search to have it help classify the tool automatically, classify the document for you as well, based on keywords and rules. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that file. I can see it successfully marked it. And when I refresh it, I also can see that the Sentris marking is applied to indicate that it's a marked file. You can also view the markings if you go to Properties under the Sentris tab. You'll see that it's marked as a top secret sample as we marked before. Now I'm going to flip back over to user 2 who only has up to secret. And this time I'm going to go into that same share. And as we would expect, that file is not visible to us because while we have access and the ACLs to see the folder and the files, we do not have the attributes for that particular file since it's top secret and we only have up to secret. So it's hidden from us and we can't view that. And so all of our activity has been tracked as well. So one of the great features of BrickStor is the user behavior auditing. So I'm going to switch back over to this hub panel and dive into this a little bit. So all of that activity that's happening is being monitored with active defense. So we can go to our UB dashboard and we'll actually see all of the activity that's been happening. So we can see the active users, obviously user 1 and user 2, even the administrator is accessing stuff. We can see the active data sets, what they're looking at, what the top and most active data sets are as well. But we can also drill down and see a report of exactly what's happening in real time too. So if I want to get a report of what everybody's doing, I can do that right now. And I can see all that activity that we talked about, right? We see user 2 accessing that webinar data set. We can also filter and see other things based on what's happening. So maybe I want to create a particular report that's based on just what user 1's activity is. I can do that as well too. So I'm going to go to the raw operations for this all time. If I wanted to, I could, as I mentioned, select just user 2 or user 1. So in this case, I'm just going to do user 1's activities. And I could limit it to a specific IP address. I can also, if interested, limit it to a particular directory or file path. I can also use this to look for a file or folder that I might be interested in. And I can look at time of day. Maybe I'm only interested in the time of, after hours for user 1, or maybe I want to see all their activity. In this case, I'm just going to do all their activity. Click user 1. I go and open that report, and I can see all of the activity for user 1 going into the webinar folder, creating the files, renaming and replacing, right? I created that and renamed it. So all of that becomes visible and accessible there. And we can even filter it by write operations or read operations as well. We also have the ability to detect and stop incidents or malicious behavior. So let me flip over. In this case, I want to show you when a user performs something malicious or inappropriate. So I'm actually going to go back to user 1. I'm going to go to a different data set that has a lot of data in it, which is the Sentris data set here. And I go over into the archive files here. And I'm going to actually go ahead and delete all the files in this data set. What we're going to see is that it's actually going to disconnect me because I've exceeded my excessive deletes for this. So what happens is I'm now disconnected as user 1. I can't access that data set anymore. And if we go back over to this environment, we're going to see there's an incident that's been created. So we go into here. Also, this could fire off a webhook to Teams or Slack. So you don't have to be in this environment to see that there's an issue. It's going to send an alert to whatever tool or dashboard you're using. We can see in the top there's a blocked user and host. And if I go into the details here, I can see that user 1 has been implicated in this, the client IP they're coming from, and what's happening. So I can acknowledge this and let people know I'm investigating it as an admin. All of this activity is also being recorded down in the notes and history. So this can be exported as a report later for the incident. Now we can see we're blocking my account and IP, and we can also see what files were affected. So if we go into here, we can see all those files that were affected from that data set. Now, automatically the solution recommends restoring these files if that was inappropriate, right? So right from here, we can select these files and it'll actually restore those files right to the live file system. So it'll do that without having to go figure out what was the right file. Because user behavior is tracking all of the activity of what's happening, we know which files were affected right before the incident, so we can restore those out of the immutable snapshots right before that. This works for destructive events like deletes or modifications. It also works for ransomware, where somebody's encrypting all the files, where we'll remove the encrypted file and replace it with the pre-attack version right before the incident. So we've restored the files here. We go back to the view incident. Now we're still blocking that user one, but we're not blocking any of the other users. So other users can continue to operate. Just to show you that, if I go to user 2 here, they still have the ability to access all those data sets and share. So if they go into, let's say, that same Sentris folder, they will be able to access and see all that data, right? All that they're supposed to be able to see is still accessible. We're only blocking the bad user or malicious activity, so you have that cyber resilience too. So now, once we're positive it's okay that user account's not compromised, or we're fine with it, we can actually restore access for that user as well and unblock them, and then unblock here. And so now they will be able to access that information. I can close the incident out too, and if I go back to user 1, they'll be able to once again access the data and see those files just like before. So very easy to do things like that. Also, we're detecting for things like privileged access abuse, as I mentioned too. So things where an admin is using stuff is something we want to be careful of in these high hygiene environments, right? So what we're going to do now is go in as an admin when we don't have a rule or a ticket saying I should be doing this and I'm using an admin account to do things that wouldn't really be appropriate for me to do without having a ticket and rule entered in here. So I'm actually going to go in here and start accessing this file. And right away, we can see incident created where that access for that file and the access for the right are popping up. So now, if let's say I'm doing stuff and I forgot to put a ticket in before, and maybe I'm supposed to be doing some sort of worker migration with that admin account, if we didn't pre-do it, we can also actually create an ignore rule to allow me to do that. So we can say, hey, I want to allow this behavior temporarily and have this auto expire after a period of time. So I'm going to be allowed specifically to do this, but only for the next hour, per se. And we're going to allow that. We can limit it to my specific client that I'm coming from and my particular account. It'll still all be audited, everything I'm doing. We're just not going to fire off an incident for that the next time that happens. And so we can create that and close the incident for that too. So not only do we have attribute-based access controls, but we have that zero trust enforcement to evaluate trust for each file operation. So things that shouldn't be done or are abnormal are immediately alerted upon, as well as with user behavior, you can quickly go back and review that as well. There's lots of other features to show you about Hub and BrickStor SP. And if you are interested, we definitely would love to show you in a further demo or call.